All right, so chapter 4, section 7 deals with the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So this right here is just something that you guys have to memorize. Have to.
Is that like the formula?
This is the quadratic formula.
The worst formula you're ever gonna have.
Yes. So again, we get our a from the number in front of the x squared, our b from the number in front of our x, and the c from the number that has no x in our equation. So we have to solve the equation using the quadratic formula. What did we say the quadratic formula is?
X equal b over negative plus square root b minus b squared minus
4ac
4ac over 2.
Okay, so this is our quadratic formula. In this equation, what's our a? 1. What's our b? -5. And what's our c? So now we're just going to take this and plug it into our quadratic formula. So we have negative times a -5 plus or minus the square root of -5 squared minus 4 times a times c, which is 4 times 1 times -7, over 2 times a, which is 1.
This isn't even hard. You're just plugging it.
It's just plugging it in. So the hardest part is memorizing the formula.
Yeah.
And then after that?
And then after that, it's easy. You just have to plug it in, and we solve it. So how do we simplify this? What's negative -5? Positive 5. Plus or minus the square root. What is -5 squared? 25 minus, what's 4 times 1 times -7? -28, so this becomes a plus 28 under here. And then we divide by 2.
Now you gotta add 25 and 28.
Now we add 25 and 28, so we have 5 plus or minus the square root of 53. 36 minus 36, yep,
over 2,
yes.
and then you get negative 6.
So now we have negative 6.
Positive or negative over 0. You put, let's do that. You put the square root of 0.
What is the square root of 0?
0.
0.
Substitute 0. Yeah, okay, I heard it.
So if this is 0, we just have negative 6 over 2 now.
So that's our answer, negative 6 over 2.
How do we simplify negative 6 over 2?
Negative 3 over 1.
Which is
No, it's negative 1.
negative 3. So our answer here is just negative 3. So for this one, since we got a whole number, what would be an easier way to solve for x here that we already know how to do instead of using the quadratic formula?
Oh, the other thing that we did?
The other thing we learned. So if we had two factors of 9 that add up to 6, what would they be?
3 and 3.
3 and 3. And then we would change the signs and it would be negative 3.
Wait, but we can use it?
No, not if it says solve with the quadratic formula.
Yeah.
So our answer is negative 3.
If this is 0, you turn it to a fraction?
So this right here, the square root of 0 is 0.
And we can't do anything with it.
And negative 6 plus or minus 0 is just negative 6.
Yeah.
So that's why I turned this into the fraction. All right, any other questions? All right, let's go to the next example.
Yo, I'm watching it now. That man has like 22.
All right, what's the quadratic formula?
Negative
Negative
b
b
positive
squared.
minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a.
What's our A here?
2,
What's our B?
negative 1,
And what's our C?
4, or no,
0.
0.
Well, how do we get this equation to equal 0?
You gotta
Subtract it on
subtract
both
4.
sides.
We have to subtract 4 from both sides. So our new equation would be 2x squared minus x minus 4 is equal to 0. So what's our C here?
Negative 4.
Negative 4. So again, in order to use the quadratic formula, we have to have it equal to 0. So what's our formula going to look like once we plug in our numbers?
Negative
2. Oh, negative 1.
Look what you said with the.
Sure, because I was reading. Negative 1 plus or minus 1 squared minus 4 and parentheses 2. Then negative 4.
What goes on the bottom?
2. 1. 2 squared. 2 parentheses 1.
2 times 2, because it's 2 times A, and A is 2. So 2 times 2 is on the bottom.
A is 2.
Oh.
Okay, so now we simplify. So a negative negative 1 becomes just a positive 1. Plus or minus the square root. What's negative 1 squared? 1 minus, what's 4 times 2 times negative 4?
33.
That's negative 16. Wait, oh no.
Negative 32. So the minus sign becomes a plus, and we have 32. And what's on the bottom? 4. Okay, so how do we simplify this?
1 plus or minus square root 33 over 4.
Perfect. And that's the answer.
Why is it 33?
Because it's got a perfect square.
We added 1 plus 32,
And you can't simplify 4.
and we can't simplify it.
Wait, this is all the homework song?
And one more thing. Ready for the next example?
Yes.
Solve the equation using the quadratic formula. So what's our quadratic formula?
Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a.
Perfect. So here, since we have this equation's equal to 0, we can just name what our a, b, and c are. So what's our a?
3.
What's our b?
-4.
And what's our c?
3.
What is it? 3. So now that we plug it into our equation, our formula, what's our formula going to be?
Positive 4.
It'll become a positive 4
Plus or minus -4 squared. Or, yeah. Minus -4 times 3 times 3. -2 times 3.
Perfect. So now we just have to simplify. So we have 4 plus or minus the square root. What's -4 squared? 16. Minus, what's 4 times 3 times 3? 36. Over, what's 2 times 3? 6. So now we have 4 plus or minus the square root of, what is -20 over
6.
6.
That's your answer.
That's our answer.
Discriminant.
Okay, so next we have the discriminant. So the discriminant is just what is under the square root. So this discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. And the discriminant is going to tell us how many solutions we have for our equation.
So we only have to plug into that?
We only have to plug it into this when finding the discriminant. So if our discriminant is positive, we're going to have 2 real solutions to our quadratic, to our equation here. If our discriminant is equal to 0, then we have 1 real solution. And if it is negative,
No.
then we have no real solutions. So if it's positive, we have 2. If it's equal to 0, we have 1. And if it's negative, we have no real solutions.
How do you know when it's positive?
Because
It'll come out with a positive number. We're going to do some examples and you'll see.
Positive is, so positive. What is solution when it's 0?
Okay, so find the discriminant of the quadratic equation and determine the number of real solutions. So all we have to do here is find the discriminant. What's the formula that gives us the discriminant?
b squared minus 4 AC. Oh, yeah, AC.
So it's just what's going to be under the square root, but we're not using the square root. So in this equation, what's our A? What's our A?
-1.
What's our B?
2.
And what's our C?
-9.
-9. So now we're going to plug in. We have 2 squared
-4. -1. And -1. 4.
So we have 4 minus.
36. -36.
So it would be minus, we keep the minus sign, and then 4 times
Yeah.
negative 1 times negative 9 becomes a positive 36, but we just keep the minus sign there. So now we have 4 minus 36, which is positive or negative?
Positive.
Negative
Negative
32. So this here is our discriminant. And how many number of real solutions?
One.
None.
None, bro.
No
It's negative.
solution.
It's negative.
Oh, because if your x is negative, there's no solution.
Right. So no real solutions. So if our discriminant is negative, we have no real solutions. All right, let's go to the next one. We're going to do the same thing. So what's the formula that tells us the discriminant?
B squared minus 4ac. Yeah.
Always going to be this when you're finding the number of real solutions. So what's our A?
-2.
What's our B?
-3.
And what's our C?
5.
Okay, so now we're just going to plug in our A, B, and C. So what do we get?
-3 squared.
So 9 minus, what's 4 times 2?
8.
8, and then 8 times 5? 40. So it would be negative 8 and then negative 40. So if we have a negative minus a negative, what does it become?
Positive.
A positive.
So it's 49.
So we have 9 plus 40, which is?
49. And it equals 2.
And since this number is positive, how many solutions do we have?
2.
2 real solutions. This will be on the test.
Aren't this is 1?
I think it'll be after math games.
So that, like, in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wait, this is the last thing we're learning for the test, right?
No, we're gonna learn one more. Last one. Find the discriminant of the quadratic equation x squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to 0. Determine the number of real solutions. So how do we find the discriminant?
B squared minus 4ac.
So what's our A?
Oh, 2. Wait a minute.
What do you?
I'm sorry.
What's our B? And what's our C? So now we just plug in our A, B, and C. And what do we get?
36
So negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9. So what's negative 6 squared? 36. And what is 4 times 1 times 9?
36.
36. So it gives you 0. So how many solutions do we have? 1 real solution.
That's it.
That's it. So this is everything for 4.7.